One thing that I've witnessed in spiritual places recently is that everybody's trying to heal as fast as possible. And that's just not how healing works. This idea of constantly having to fix yourself as if something's broken. None of us are broken. We just have parts that we need mending. And that can come from gaining growth from knowledge, learning on the things we feel we lack in. And that can come from therapy or working through past traumas. Or that can come from just sitting with yourself, clearing your mind, and just listening to what your body and your soul and you're telling yourself. And of course, it sounds more simple than it is, but a lot of it is just that first step of going in and getting it for yourself. But this idea that we are broken or that we're lacking in something, and this desire to keep reading and keep spiritually searching for something, this is where it can become a hindrance. This idea that we need to grow or expand, or a lot of what I hear is the collective conscious is gathering and big changes are coming. When we hear something like that, like big changes are coming, or in Christianity, all the Christians are like, it's the end of the world or something, we feel this sense of panic and this need of preparation. But what are we preparing for? And all it did was cause a lot of people mental anguish and this anxiety that this big change is going to happen. And with this anxiety and the spiritual pressure to evolve or ascend or to become the true version of yourself, we end up rushing the spiritual practice. And what happens when we rush? We tend to skip over important parts. And when it's something as important as working on yourself, do you really want to skip over parts? The crows say no. And they're right, we don't. Spiritual growth, I'm a firm believer, comes from experience, making mistakes, noticing those mistakes, forgiving yourself for those mistakes, and building upon those mistakes so they don't happen again. And sometimes some people call that a healing addiction, getting addicted to healing yourself. Again, going back to this idea that we're broken. But none of us are really broken. We make mistakes so we can learn from them. And as a lot of you know, with working through childhood traumas and social conditioning, that's a big part of the growth, is reworking and rewiring how we were raised to be and finding our authentic self, which is what we're discovering. We don't know what it is yet until you learn and experience and figure it out. And with this healing addiction and these ideas that we have about what spirituality is, it really is speaking to me to consider how we think of spirituality and how we teach others by example or by the way that society is shaping what is spirituality, which I'll go into in another video eventually. And a friend of mine recently, she was saying, JJ, I have this trauma that, it's such a barren on me and I don't know what to do. And I said, have you been meditating on it? And she goes, yes, I meditate all the time. And so I went to her and said, you have this trauma from 20 or whatever years ago, and you expect that meditating once in a while or for a year, and you expect to rework and rewire 20 years of trauma? You might need 20 years of meditating to even just scratch the surface of that trauma. And usually when someone hears advice like that, they might get anxiety, they might get defensive, but she responded in a really good way and was like, I never thought of it like that. She took that criticism, contemplated on it for a bit, and then just decided on her own that, maybe this advice is worth looking into. And it made me really happy for her. And when I said something like that to my friend, all this has just been things that have been said to me, or I collected, or I read through a book, or I've experienced in my life. It's a very beautiful thing when we come to these realizations. An example with my life was I was in a toxic relationship, and my friends recommended to call into one of those like free numbers that you can reach out to. And I remember picking up the phone, and this lady goes, "Oh, I'm very sorry that you were in an abusive relationship." And I was like, "An abusive relationship? I wasn't abused. She didn't hit me." And she goes, "Just because she didn't hit you doesn't mean it wasn't abusive." And she kind of explained it a bit. And I just remember that I just started crying because it all dawned on me that it was abusive. And my mind didn't want to admit that. So when it finally got proven wrong, this rush of emotions came out and I couldn't control myself. All the hurt came out from the realization. And these are powerful realizations that change you. And I can look at that toxic relationship now and be like, I'm thankful to her for showing me what I was doing wrong by not realizing what this was and by pretending everything's going to work out or something. So even in the worst situations, if you can grab a little bit of positivity or learn something from it, you can make that negative relationship, experience, etc. into something powerful. But yeah, healing, going back to the speed of it and this desire to rush, we like to think of spirituality and healing as a metaphor with nature, for example. But with nature, trees take a long time to grow. Forests, flowers, habitats all grow over a period of years, sometimes thousands of years. Nature never rushes, and it's always healing, regrowing, blossoming. And as humans, we need to do the same. We need to slow things down, know that spirituality and growth comes from time. Another example from my personal life, I have a younger friend in her 20s, and I was telling her about how when you speak with an 80-year-old man who's lived through a world war and lived in many different countries, they're very knowledgeable. And with knowledge comes a great spiritual growth. And she said, "Yeah, but I'm 20 and I've gone to retreats and I've read a lot of books. Maybe I'm more spiritual than the 80-year-old." And I said, "Not exactly. In those ways, you're more knowledgeable. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're more wise." And then we get into the difference of knowledge versus wisdom, right? Knowledge is learned, wisdom is gained experience. And wisdom, I would almost say, is knowledge applied. You can read all the books about compassion and all the books about love and spirituality, but never practice one of them. So you're knowledgeable, but are you wise? And I'm also a very firm believer that one of the biggest things in spirituality is applying it. The monks talk about it, the Christians talk about it, the Buddhists talk about it. Be kind to other people, give back to your community, work on yourself, work on the outer and the inner. And a lot of people that practice spirituality know this. But from my experience, in my surroundings, it's very rare to see people actually practice this. And it's very interesting how some people think that they can go away for a week for a retreat, or they can go to countries like Nepal or Bhutan or China or Japan and study with spiritual people and come back after a month or even a year and be so transformed. I know with one of the silent retreats here in Canada, a friend of mine went and she said it was so transformative and amazing experience without talking for a week and doing the Vispana, that was it, Vispana retreat. But then she goes, but after the week, you're back home and you're back on your cell phone and you're back watching TV, and that transformative experience remains in your memory and remains in your body, and you have it in your mind and your soul. But the minute you step out of that practice, the meaning's also gone. Did you really learn? Or was it just an experience, right? And that's why I feel, and I'm going to get into it in another video where I talk about my desire to go and study with the monks. Maybe that will be the next video. But I as well wanted to go study with the monks until I met a girl from Bhutan, and she basically said one sentence that changed my whole mind about it. And stay tuned for that video, because I feel like that's something at least was mind-blowing to me. So I feel like it will be for some of you that maybe were thinking of studying with the monks or going to a spiritual place or even a Vipassana retreat. Because what I learned from that one sentence kind of changed my mind about being solitary and seeking spirituality outside oneself. To keep it short, we don't need to. And in the end, maybe real healing isn't about trying to fix ourselves as fast as possible, but maybe it's about trying to live with ourselves more patiently. And remember, be still, be wild, and be free. Thank you.